Did you hear a bell?
His head's in another time zone.
Hey, just be sure that your post-op patients are all okay before you take off.
Oh, yes.
Henry, everything is okay.
For years, fans of MASH adored the sweet, naive, yet brilliant Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly, the one man who seemed to hold the entire 4077th together. Played by the immensely talented Gary Burghoff, Radar wasn't just a character, he was the heart of the show. His innocence, his humor, and that gentle humanity made him one of television's most beloved faces. But when Radar suddenly disappeared from the screen, viewers were devastated. There was no scandal, no public statement, and no grand farewell tour. Gary Burghoff simply walked away, leaving behind one of the biggest shows in TV history at the height of its success. For decades, fans wondered, what really happened? Behind the laughter, the applause, and the awards, Gary was fighting something much deeper. His departure wasn't about money or fame. It was about something heartbreakingly personal. Rumors swirled, disagreements on set, exhaustion, or a secret feud. Yet the real reason was far more human, and far more painful than anyone imagined. What could drive a man who had everything, fame, respect, and millions of adoring fans, to walk away from it all? Tonight, we uncover the truth behind Gary Burghoff's sudden exit from MASH, the story the cameras never showed, and the struggle that nearly broke one of Hollywood's most gentle souls. When MASH first premiered in 1972, no one could have predicted it would become one of the most iconic shows in television history. The series, inspired by the 1970 film of the same name, balanced comedy and tragedy in a way that had never been done before. It told the story of army doctors and nurses stationed at a mobile army surgical hospital during the Korean War, people who faced horror every day, yet managed to find laughter amid chaos. And right in the center of it all was Gary Burghoff as Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly. With his boyish looks, his Iowa accent, and his uncanny ability to hear incoming helicopters before anyone else, Radar became the heart and soul of the show. He was pure, loyal, and full of hope, the embodiment of innocence in a world that had forgotten it. But few knew that the kindness Gary brought to Radar wasn't just acting, it was who he truly was. Behind the scenes, his castmates adored him. Alan Alda, who played Hawkeye Pierce, once said, "Gary had this beautiful vulnerability on screen. He didn't play Radar, he was Radar. In those early years, Gary was on top of the world. He had already played the same character in the original MASH film, making him the only cast member to transition from the movie to the television series." Viewers fell in love with Radar instantly. Letters poured into CBS every week, praising his charm and sincerity. He was nominated for multiple Emmys and won one in 1977. But as the seasons went on, Gary began to feel the pressure. The long shooting days, the constant retakes, and the emotional toll of the show's heavy themes began to weigh on him. MASH wasn't just a comedy. It often tackled serious issues like death, trauma, and the moral cost of war. For Gary, who was deeply empathetic, those storylines hit hard. There were moments on set when Gary would walk off quietly between takes, sitting alone near the trailers. He wasn't being distant. He was emotionally drained. One crew member recalled, "Gary had this incredible sensitivity. He felt everything deeply. Sometimes when the scene was too heavy, you could see it in his eyes long after we stopped filming." And there was something else, something more personal gnawing at him. While the rest of the cast was bonding like family, Gary's home life was quietly falling apart. The constant filming schedule kept him away from his wife and young daughter, and the strain was becoming unbearable. Every time he left for work, his heart stayed behind at home. Alan Alda later revealed that Gary had confided in him about feeling torn between his duty to the show and his love for his family. "He didn't complain about fame," Alda said. "He just wanted to be a good father." But the more successful MASH became, the harder that got. The world saw a cheerful, lovable character who brought light into the darkness of war. But off-camera, Gary was struggling to find his own light. He was a gentle soul caught between two worlds, the one that made him famous and the one that made him feel whole. He didn't know it yet, but the decision that would change his life, the decision to walk away from MASH, was already beginning to form in his heart. Because sometimes, Even the kindest people can reach a breaking point. By the late 1970s, MASH had become a television phenomenon. The cast was famous around the world, and millions tuned in weekly to laugh, cry, and escape into the bittersweet chaos of the 4077th. But for Gary Burghoff, that fame came at a cost he could no longer ignore. Off-screen, his personal life was unraveling. His marriage to Janet Gale, which had begun with so much love, was now strained by the distance that fame demanded. Gary's shooting schedule left him exhausted and emotionally unavailable. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was playing the moral heart of the show, yet losing touch with his own. He adored his young daughter Gina, but the time apart gnawed at him. Whenever he looked into her eyes, he saw everything he was missing. Friends on set noticed a change in Gary. He was quieter, more withdrawn. Once known for his warmth and humor, he began spending long hours alone in his dressing room, sketching or writing letters to his family. He carried the weight of the world, a crew member recalled. Gary wasn't a man who could separate work from emotion. If something hurt him personally, you saw it in his face. There were also mounting tensions on set. The atmosphere of MASH was famously collaborative, but it could also be intense. Alan Alda, who by then had taken on a directorial role, was deeply invested in the show's creative direction. Gary, meanwhile, struggled with the evolving tone of the series. As MASH leaned more toward drama and away from its early humor, Gary felt that Radar, the innocent heart of the camp, no longer fit naturally within the darker storylines. He once told a friend, "Radar's supposed to be everyone's little brother, but the world they're writing now doesn't have room for little brothers anymore." Gary's sensitivity, the same quality that made Radar so beloved, also made Hollywood a hard place for him. He wasn't built for ego battles or political maneuvering. He wanted harmony, not hierarchy. But in an industry fueled by pressure and deadlines, his gentle nature often clashed with the reality of production. To make matters worse, Gary's physical health began to suffer. Years earlier, he had been born with a slight deformity in his left hand, something he learned to hide brilliantly on screen through clever camera angles. But as time went on, the long hours and stress began to cause pain in his hand, making daily tasks difficult. The breaking point came during the filming of MASH's 7th season. Gary had just finished shooting a particularly emotional episode, one that mirrored his real-life struggles. In it, Radar had to deal with news from home, a story about love, loss, and responsibility. After the final take, Gary reportedly broke down in tears. Alan Alda, who was nearby, put an arm around him and asked softly, "You okay, Gary?" Gary just shook his head. "I think I've done everything I can do with him, Al. I think it's time to go home." It wasn't anger or frustration that led him there. It was heartbreak. He realized that while the world adored Radar, Gary Burghoff, the man, was slowly disappearing behind him. Fame had given him everything and taken just as much away. That night, Gary went home and looked at a family photo on his piano. In that quiet moment, the decision became clear. He wasn't just leaving a show. He was choosing to reclaim his life. And when he walked onto the MASH set for the final time, no one could have imagined how emotional his farewell would be, both for the cast and for millions watching at home. When word spread across the MASH set that Gary Burghoff was leaving, the mood shifted overnight. The cast, who had become like family, were devastated, and not just because they were losing a beloved co-star. They were losing the very heart of the show. Radar wasn't just another character. He represented the innocence that reminded everyone what they were fighting for. Alan Alda, Mike Farrell, Loretta Sweet, and Jamie Farr all tried to talk to Gary, hoping he might reconsider. But his mind was made up. It wasn't anger, Mike Farrell said years later. Gary was tired. He was emotionally spent. He needed peace, and we had to respect that. The producers decided to give Radar a proper farewell, one worthy of his legacy. The episode, titled Goodbye Radar, became one of the most emotional in MASH history. It would be filmed in 2 parts and feature Radar's return from leave to discover that the camp could function without him, a symbolic reminder that even the most indispensable people eventually have to let go. But What the audience didn't see was how much pain Gary carried behind the scenes. During filming, he often fought back tears between takes. The story felt too close to home. In one scene, Radar reads a letter informing him that his beloved Uncle Ed has passed away and that he must go home to take care of the family farm. The cameras rolled and Gary's face crumpled, not from acting but from genuine heartbreak. After the director yelled, "Cut," there was silence on set. No one spoke. A few crew members quietly wiped their eyes. Loretta Sweet later recalled, "That wasn't Radar saying goodbye to the 4077th. That was Gary saying goodbye to all of us." In his final scene, Radar stands in the doorway of the camp, looking out one last time before walking away. Alan Alda remembered the moment vividly. When he turned back to wave, I almost couldn't keep it together. It felt real, like we were saying goodbye to a brother. The day the episode aired, millions of viewers across America wept. Letters poured into CBS by the thousands. Fans begged for Radar to come back, some even suggesting entire storylines to explain his return. But Gary had already moved on. He retreated from Hollywood, focusing on his family and his art. He began painting and even invented small mechanical devices. His quiet mind always needed something to create. Still, fame had a way of following him. For years, interviewers tried to lure him back into the spotlight, hoping he'd talk about his departure. But Gary avoided the subject, preferring to let Radar live in the hearts of fans rather than reopen old wounds. He did make one brief return, however. In 1984, Gary reprised his role in Aftermash, a short-lived spin-off series that reunited a few original cast members. But the magic was gone. Without the heart and rhythm of the original, it just didn't feel the same. After a few appearances, Gary quietly disappeared from Hollywood once again, this time for good. Behind that decision was a simple truth. He never wanted to chase fame again. What mattered to him now was peace, something he had searched for all his life. In later interviews, when asked about his time on MASH, Gary spoke softly. "Radar was the best part of me. But to keep him alive, I had to walk away." And in that single sentence, he revealed the essence of his story. Sometimes the hardest goodbyes aren't the ones written into scripts. They're the ones written into our souls. After Gary Burghoff walked away from MASH, Hollywood didn't quite know what to make of his disappearance. One day, he was the gentle, beloved face of one of television's most successful shows. And the next, he was gone, retreating into a life of near silence. For years, fans speculated wildly about what had driven him away. Some said he clashed with producers. Others whispered about health problems or money disputes. But as time passed, the truth slowly began to surface. And it was far more human and heartbreaking than anyone imagined. Gary's decision to leave wasn't about contracts or creative differences. It was about family, exhaustion, and emotional survival. In a rare interview decades later, Gary admitted, "I was burned out. My marriage was falling apart and I was losing touch with my daughter. I didn't want to look back one day and realize I had traded love for success." After leaving the show, he moved away from Los Angeles, settling into a quieter life surrounded by nature. He spent his days painting, fishing, and inventing. Few knew that Gary was a gifted artist. His wildlife paintings sold for thousands of dollars and revealed the same sensitivity that had once defined his acting. He also invented mechanical gadgets, including a type of fishing tackle and a new kind of household device. He kept a low profile, appearing only occasionally in small TV roles or reunion specials. When asked why he never returned to mainstream fame, Gary's answer was simple. Hollywood didn't need me anymore. And for the first time I realized I didn't need it either. But the years away from the spotlight weren't without pain. Gary admitted that depression crept in during the quiet moments. He missed the camaraderie of the MASH cast and sometimes questioned whether walking away had been the right choice. Yet deep down, he knew it had saved him. Alan Alda, who stayed in touch with him through the years, said something that summed it up perfectly. Gary wasn't built for fame. He was built for honesty, and that's what made him special. The business can eat you alive if you have too big a heart. The love of his fans never faded. Decades after his final episode aired, Gary still received letters from people who grew up watching Radar O'Reilly. Many thanked him for giving them hope during difficult times. A single mother in Iowa, a soldier returning from deployment, a lonely child who found comfort in his kindness. Gary often replied to those letters himself, handwriting notes that ended with his trademark humility. If Radar helped you, that means I did something right. In his later years, Gary spoke more openly about the emotional toll of his career. He admitted that the fame of MASH had come with an invisible cost. Radar was pure, he said in a 2010 interview. And the more the world changed around him, the more I realized how rare that purity was. I didn't want to lose it, not in him and not in myself. When fans finally learned the real reason he left, they didn't judge him. They loved him more. Because Gary Burghoff's story wasn't about failure or abandonment. It was about choosing peace over pressure, love over legacy, and authenticity over applause. Today, his legacy endures, not through constant publicity or headlines, but through the millions of hearts he quietly touched. In the world of MASH, Radar O'Reilly could hear helicopters before anyone else. In real life, Gary Burghoff heard something even more profound, the sound of his own heart telling him it was time to go home, and that perhaps was his truest act of courage.